Namaste, everyone. I'd like to share with you a little bit about one of the limbs of Vedic astrology, which is called Prashna. Prashna is a Sanskrit word which actually means question. And Prashna in Western terminology is called Horary Astrology, Horary. Oftentimes, I hear someone interested in astrology, but they say they don't know what time they were born at all. And so therefore, it's not possible to know what their ascendant is without doing a lot of rectification, which can be very time consuming. So I like to share with them, actually, there's a way to do an astrology reading or to address various questions astrologically without a birth chart at all. And that's exactly the purview of Prashna. So basically, it's simply casting a chart not for the moment that someone was born, for the time, place, location of birth, but casting a chart at the moment and place where a question is asked. So that chart, in a sense, becomes the birth chart of the question. Prashna can also be used to just cast a chart at the moment a consultation begins. I like to call that a consultation chart. And so that can be read off of to do a reading without a birth chart even, and can show many different things in a similar way. It's read in a similar way as the birth chart, actually. The difference between Prashna and the natal chart is that Prashna is zooming in more on the immediate concern. So we say that Prashna generally pertains to about a year from the time it's cast, and then a year out, the Prashna is good. Whereas the birth chart is a more general, broad scope looking at the whole life. So, ideally, it can be very good to use the birth chart and the Prashna together, kind of in combination, and that can show a lot of detail. So anyways, a question recently came to my mind, and I cast a Prashna chart for myself, and I thought that I'd like to share that with you so you can have a sense of what a Prashna chart is like and how we can work with it. So I'll just share my screen here. Okay. So on the right here is the recent Prashna chart that I cast. And I'll tell you the story about it. It was, let's see, April 24th. I got my first COVID vaccine. And I had unexpected difficulties with side effects. For the first vaccine, it seemed very atypical. I felt very achy, flu-like symptoms, very, very unpleasant. And because people say sometimes the second vaccine can be more difficult in terms of its, the effects of it in the days following, I was a little bit concerned. So it was April 24th that I got the first vaccine. And then the next vaccine was scheduled for May 22nd, right? So in between that time, I was kind of thinking, oh, I don't know, do I want to do this again? Is it going to be even harder? And, people have different opinions about the vaccine, and I was hearing different opinions. And so I was just got to a point, May 8th, where I was saying, okay, I just really need to figure this out and decide. And that's when I decided to cast a Prashna chart. So this chart was cast in Scappoose, Oregon, which is near Portland, on May 8th, 2021. You can see up here, right at 12:59 So almost 1 p.m. And so here's the chart on the right. So I'll just explain a little bit what I saw in the chart. Ultimately, I did decide to get the vaccine. And I'll explain what I saw in the chart, which led me to that decision. And then I'll tell you what my experience was with the vaccine. So this is a Leo rising chart. The ascendant here, the number 5 means Leo. And in Prashna, that actually is a good thing because it's what we call a head rising constellation, Shirshodaya in Sanskrit, head rising. So Leo, being a head rising constellation aspected by the benefic Jupiter, who's the best of the benefic planets, is very favorable. So already seeing Leo rising aspected by Jupiter was starting to lean me in the direction of, yes, it's a good idea to get the vaccine. The second point is that we see the Lord of the Ascendant, which is the Sun who rules Leo, going to a good house, the 9th house, exalted in Aries, which means powerful, and also very close to the midheaven, MC, medium, Coeli, the midheaven, highest point in the sky. And the sun becomes not only strong in Aries, but powerful when it's at the midheaven, gets what we call directional strength. So even though it's in the 9th house, usually we say the sun gets directional strength in the 10th house. But just for astrologers out there, if we look at the Shripati chart, it's going to be in the 10th house. So I give it directional strength. So this sun is very powerful. It's like double strength. And the sun itself is not aspected by any malefic planets. And the ascendant is aspected by Jupiter and also no malefic planets. And so that means the ascendant is very strong. And that is also a highly favorable factor for a Prashna, again, leading to a positive answer, which would be, yes, the vaccine's a good idea. So the other things that I saw were, we have 3 benefics and Kendras. These prominent houses here are called angular houses. So Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, all in Kendra houses, which protects the health. And then we see Saturn and Mars in what we call Upachaya houses, which means they're out of the way, that these malefics are not going to cause trouble. They're in the places we want them to be. So all these things were actually highly favorable. And in a Prashna, we don't see this many factors converging in a favorable direction so often. So all these things that I've explained alone are enough really to give the answer to the question. But there's some other details we can get from this chart, which is very interesting. So one of those things is, one of the concerns with COVID has been, for many people, social isolation. And so one of the main reasons to get the vaccine is to feel, less social restriction. And this chart shows, in a very interesting way, what we could see as being a pattern that shows the end of an isolative time. So it's very interesting. What it is the 12th house rules like being on retreat, more introspection, isolation, being alone. And we see the Lord of the 12th house, which is the moon, go to the 8th house, which is a house of, we could say, termination, That's one of the meanings of the 8th house. So the moon, lord of the 12th house, goes to the 8th house, and it's very dark because it was a couple of days before the new moon. So dark waning moon. The moon is aspected by Saturn. The 12th house is aspected by Saturn. So this is a pattern that we call Vimala Yoga. For those astrologers out there, and Vimala Yoga is a favorable combination. And the way I interpret it in the context of this question is it's very clearly showing the end of a period of isolation. Because again, 12th lord of being alone or isolated, going to the 8th, destruction or end of isolation. And again, Saturn kind of reinforcing that whole pattern and making the Vimala Yoga. So it's very fascinating how the chart reflected that idea, because that's the very reason, one of the main reasons for getting the vaccine. The other thing is, in the Tajika system, which is more the kind of Arabic system of astrology, which has become integrated into Vedic astrology, we can use these Kendra houses in the context of a medical prashna in specific ways. So the first house is the doctor, said to be the doctor. In this case, the first house is ruled by the sun, which among many things represents the government. So the chart is showing that the doctor, quote unquote, is the government in a sense. And the government is a strong influence and acting dharmically in the 9th house in the context of this vaccine. So it shows the government taking a good, strong stance, and that we can trust, the government in this context. 4th house shows the treatment. So in this case, the 4th house is ruled by Mars, which represents sharp things. So again, obviously the question here is regarding a vaccine, which is an injection. And we see Mars, it's ruled by Mars because Scorpio is in the 4th house here. Mars goes to the 11th house in a constellation called Ardra, which is one of the 27 nakshatras, or 27 lunar mansions, lunar asterisms. Now, Ardra specifically has a quality of being Tikshna, which means sharp in Sanskrit. So not only is the 4th house ruled by Mars, which represents sharp things, but Mars goes to a star group which has the quality of being sharp. And so the chart actually reflects that the question is about an injection or getting an injection. K2 is also similar to Mars. And in this case, we see K2 in the 4th house. So again, it's showing that the treatment in question is an injection, which is very fascinating. The 7th house is considered the disease. And in this case, the disease is a pandemic, right? And Jupiter represents growth and expansion. So something that has been, growing and expanding, in society, in the group that we're in, because it's in Aquarius. So it's showing this kind of indication. And the 10th house indicates the patient. So this would indicate, in this case, me. And we see Venus here in its own sign. And so that's a strong position, which in this case, I would interpret as, that I was willing to be compliant, cooperative, going through the treatment, and also that it would be okay for me, that it wouldn't be harmful. So anyways, those are some of the indications that I saw, which I found very fascinating. One more thing I'd like to share about the chart is, in a birth chart, we have the planetary periods called Vimshotri Dasha, which is a 120-year cycle where all the 9 planets that we use in Vedic astrology have a different period of time where the results come forward. And so in a Prashna chart, because it's good for about a year, one technique of timing what we're seeing in a Prashna chart and then making predictions is to condense that Vimshotri system of planetary periods into 1 year. And so it's what we call a 1 year condensed Vimshotri Dasha. So anyways, based on this, at the time of the question, which was on May 8th, so you can see here's the 1 year Vimshotri. And by the way, for astrologers out there, this technique is, you can find it in Prashna Marga, which is a traditional text on Prashna. So it was May 8th. So when I cast the chart, the planetary period was Mercury Sun. Mercury Sun. And so the real thing I wanted to see was what was the period and sub-period when I would get the injection and a few days after, and would it be a difficult period? When would it improve? That sort of thing. So the vaccine was scheduled for May 22nd, right? So when I looked at May 22nd, that was Mercury Rahu. And so this was very interesting to me because Rahu, indicates foreigners or foreign things. And so in this case, it involved, when you get a vaccine, it's like a foreign substance that your body has to then figure out how to take care of, basically, right? So that was very interesting. And, Rahu can be a more challenging planet. It is malefic. So my prediction was that, after getting the vaccine, I would probably have a challenging day after that. But then on May 24th, which you don't need astrology to tell you that, right? But it showed it confirmed it astrologically, which was interesting. And then May 24th, you can see it goes from Rahu subperiod into Mercury Jupiter. So Mercury major period, Jupiter subperiod. And Jupiter is aspecting that ascendant, again, very closely. So it's very favorable for the body, for the health, for things improving. So based on this system of this condensed dasha, I predicted that by May 24th, I would start feeling much better. So interestingly, I'll tell you what happened. Excuse me. On the 22nd, I got the vaccine. The 23rd, things were difficult, but actually easier than the first one for some reason. So, so it really wasn't much of a problem, and that's maybe unusual, but for me, that's how it went. And, but for a day, I was resting, I was feeling tired, my arm was pretty sore, all that kind of stuff, some flu-like symptoms. And then May 24th, I woke up that morning feeling much better than the day before. So I was about 50% there. And so there was a definite marked improvement. And then by the 25th, I was pretty much fine, and I was able to be back and up and doing everything, all my normal things. So anyways, I hope you found that interesting about Prashna. If you have any questions about it, feel free to contact me. One thing about Prashna that's important to know is that it only really works when the question is sincere. So it says in the texts, for example, that if someone comes to an astrologer and asks a question, and it becomes clear that the person is just trying to test the astrologer, if the question isn't a serious question, or anything like that, the chart is not going to reflect the situation the way that this one did, for example. Things just don't align under those circumstances. And so, again, Prashna works when the question is sincere and when there's a real sense of need or a real sense of urgency. If that question has a kind of a shakti to it, it has some energy, it has some feeling behind it, then Prashna is effective. Otherwise, you'll find that it just it's not going to reflect the situation. So that's a little bit about Prashna. And again, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll look forward to posting something again sometime soon. Okay, namaste.